On the morning of February 8, 1943, German security police entered a house at 77 Rue de Lourmel in Paris. They searched rooms that had served as a chapel, a dining hall, an office, and a shelter. They questioned the people inside. And in the pocket of Yuri Skobtsov, they found a letter that connected the house to the protection of Jews. Yuri was Maria Skobtsova's adult son. She was away when the search began. The police took him into custody and left the house behind them, its tables, religious images, beds, food stores, names, and paper. Everything that had made the place useful could now be read as evidence. That was the danger of this house. It did not separate worship from the street. Its door opened for unemployed refugees before the war, then for hungry families, prisoners' relatives, and people hunted under anti-Jewish laws. Father Dimitri Klepinin, the priest who served there, issued false baptismal certificates. Maria found shelter and hiding places, gathered food, maintained contacts, and helped people move towards safety. Protection left a trail. The raid is often told as the beginning of the final chapter. But it is a better place to begin the whole story, because every room the police searched contained an answer to a question Maria had been asking for most of her life. What is faith worth if it keeps the suffering person outside? To understand how Lourmel became a rescue center, we have to go back to Elizaveta Pylenko's childhood, her political work during the Russian Revolution, the death of her daughter Anastasia, and the refugee houses she organized in Paris. The rescue network of 1943 depended on practices built over the previous decade. The raid did not create a new role for Maria. It exposed what her pre-war work had already become. Each room joined an idea to a task: belief to food, prayer to shelter, conscience to a name on paper. The arrangement that made the work effective also produced evidence the police could follow. She was born Elizaveta Pylenko in Riga in 1891 and grew up near the Black Sea in Anapa. Her family was Orthodox. As a child, she was drawn toward religious life. Then her father died. In the moral shock that followed, belief seemed like an invasion. By her own later account, she turned toward atheism. In St. Petersburg, she entered the literary world of the Russian Silver Age. She wrote poetry, knew celebrated writers, and listened to revolutionary arguments about remaking society. She wanted justice, but distrusted the ease with which sacrifice could become a beautiful idea discussed by people who risked nothing. Her first marriage to Dmitry Kuzmin Karaviev ended within a few years. Their daughter Gayana was born in 1913. During the same unsettled period, Elizaveta began moving back toward Christianity. It was not a sudden conversion scene. She first encountered Christ as the union of truth and self-giving, then returned gradually to prayer, the Gospels, and the life of the Church. Russia's revolutions placed ideas under pressure. In Anapa, Elizaveta joined the socialist revolutionary political world, was elected deputy mayor, and briefly carried the responsibilities of the city head. When white forces took control, a military court tried her in March 1919 and imposed a short detention. She married Daniel Skobtsov, and the family fled as Bolshevik rule advanced. They passed through Georgia, Constantinople, and the kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. Yuri was born in 1920, Anastasia in 1921. By early 1924, they were in Paris, part of a Russian exile stripped of homeland, profession, status, and often hope. Elizaveta earned money however she could, painting scarves and making dolls. She also traveled among refugee communities with the Russian student Christian movement. public questions about revolution and theology kept opening into private emergencies. A lost job, an illness, addiction, loneliness, a family that could no longer pay rent. Then, in 1926, Anastasia died. Elisaveta did not claim that the death explained suffering or converted her overnight. Her return to faith had already begun, but the loss changed its direction. She later understood it as the opening of a new road. A maternal vocation widened beyond the borders of her own family. The death she could not make meaningful became a reason to stand near the grief of others. Her political past did not vanish when she became more deeply Christian. She carried forward its impatience with injustice and its demand that ideas alter material life. What changed was her measure of success. No future system could excuse abandoning the person in front of her now. History might be transformed later. This person needed food, language, or company today. On March the 16th, 1932, at St. Sergius in Paris, Elisaveta was professed as a nun. She received the name Maria, after St. Mary of Egypt. Metropolitan Evlogi did not send her behind convent walls. Her form of monasticism would be lived among the poor and displaced people she already knew. Her first house, at Villa de Saxe, took in unemployed and homeless Russian women. When the beds filled, Maria surrendered her own room and slept in the basement. Upstairs, one room became a chapel. She painted icons. The dining room held meals, lectures, arguments, and people who did not fit neatly into a religious institution. The house was soon too small. In 1934, the work moved to 77 Rue de Lourmel. Other buildings followed. In 1935, Maria and her companions organized Orthodox action. By 1937, the Lourmel Center could serve as many as 120 dinners a day. Its chapel, kitchen, shelter, and office were not separate projects. They were one answer to the same need. The answer was usually untidy. Maria searched markets for cheap food, raised money, cooked, cleaned, argued, painted, lectured, and went looking for people who would not come to her. She visited all-night cafes where homeless Russians tried to stay warm. She visited psychiatric hospitals where exiles could be isolated by illness and by language. Some guests recovered. Others returned drunk, fought, lied, or disappeared. Money ran out. Beds ran out. Maria could be impatient and disorderly. Her houses were not efficient machines operated by a flawless saint. Their importance lay elsewhere. A person did not first have to become manageable in order to be received. That hospitality required structure. Names had to be remembered. Parcels had to reach the right prisoner. A meal had to exist before it could symbolize anything. A bed had to be found before midnight. Maria's religious life was formed inside those constraints, not above them. The chapel remained inside the crowded house. Prayer was interrupted by knocking, boiling pots, debts, and another emergency. Maria's claim was not that worship should disappear into social work. It was that worship becomes false when it is protected from the person it teaches us to love. The building therefore changed function from hour to hour. A table that served breakfast could hold a committee meeting, then papers, then an evening conversation with someone afraid to sleep outside. The rooms did not acquire importance because Maria made them sacred scenery. They became important because ordinary objects were repeatedly turned toward another person's survival. Maria made that claim explicit in her writing. In 1937, she described several forms of religious life: institutional, ritual, aesthetic, ascetic, and evangelical. She did not simply condemn the first four. She showed how each could become a shelter from love when its own preservation became the goal. The evangelical life did not despise doctrine, beauty, prayer, or discipline. It asked whether they opened the Christian toward the actual neighbor. For Maria, the decisive figure was not humanity in the abstract. It was this person with this body, this hunger, this fear, and this claim upon our time.
We must give him our last shirt and our last crust of bread.
Those words come from Maria's essay later published in English as The Asceticism of the Open Door. She was describing material service as a form of ascetic labor. Work could mean a personal charity or organized social action. The scale changed. The obligation to act from love did not. Her language refused sentimentality. Feeling concern was not enough. Service had to be useful, proportionate, and responsible. She summarized the required spirit in another compact phrase.
Attentive and responsible work, a sober and unsentimental awareness.
Behind the argument stood Christ's words in Matthew 25. The hungry person fed, the stranger welcomed, the sick and imprisoned visited. Maria read the passage with unnerving directness. Christ does not merely observe mercy from a safe distance. He identifies himself with the person who receives it. The open door, then, was not a warm metaphor. It was an ascetic practice. It meant surrendering the right to keep life orderly and sealed. It meant allowing another person's need to rearrange a schedule, a budget, a room, and eventually one's safety. The kitchen and the chapel belonged together because both were places where the self learned not to be the center. This is the theological center of Maria's life. She did not become holy in spite of soup, paperwork, and exhausting guests. Those were the materials of her discipline. Long before the occupation, the house was teaching her what she would do when the state ordered certain neighbors to be refused. That logic contains a paradox. The more seriously Maria treated the person as unique, the more organization she needed. Love without attention could waste food, expose a refugee, or make a promise the house could not keep. Attention without love could reduce someone to a file. Her answer joined the personal and practical. Look at the person, then do the work the person's reality requires. If you value documentaries that distinguish evidence from legend and take the lives of the saints seriously, you can subscribe. The occupation of Paris placed Lourmel's established routines, shelter, food, records, and contacts, inside a system of anti-Jewish persecution. German forces occupied Paris in June 1940. Shortages deepened. Anti-Jewish measures converted prejudice into administration. Registrations, exclusions, arrests, and deportations. The Lourmel house continued to feed people and became an official food distribution point. It also sent aid to prisoners and their families. Father Dimitri Klepinin joined Maria in opposing the persecution. Yad Vashem's record assigns him a specific role. He issued false baptismal certificates. Maria's documented work was different and complementary. She sheltered persecuted Jews at Lourmel, found longer-term hiding places, gathered food, kept contacts, and helped people reach safer locations. That distinction matters. Maria did not personally manufacture every certificate, and resistance did not depend on one solitary hero. It required a priest willing to create protective records, hosts willing to hide strangers, messengers, donors, drivers, cleaners, and people who could keep silent. The house became dangerous because it connected them. In July 1942, French police carried out the mass arrest known as the Vélodrome roundup. Thousands of Jewish men, women, and children were confined in the Vélodrome d'Hiver before deportation. On July 17th, Maria entered the stadium using her recognized status as a nun. She found a Russian émigré she knew among the prisoners and could offer her only moral support. but Yad Vashem records that, with the cooperation of street cleaners working inside, Maria enabled that woman's 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, to escape. Later retellings multiply the children or add vivid hiding container details. The official record does not support those additions. The secure number is 3. Its limitation is part of its truth. Maria could not empty the stadium. She found one opening and 3 children passed through it. The circle at Lourmel also prepared food parcels for detainees at Compiègne. The Jewish historian Georges Wellers later testified that these deliveries saved hostages from starvation between December 1941 and March 1942. Father Dimitri gave Wellers's wife a false baptismal certificate, helping delay the family's deportation. Nothing in this work appeared from nowhere. The same house had already learned to find beds, remember names, stretch food, visit prisoners, and respond to need without first asking whether the person was convenient. Occupation changed the penalty attached to those habits. It did not change their moral logic. Every useful thing now carried 2 meanings. A list could direct food and identify a rescuer. A certificate could protect a family and incriminate a priest. An open door could save a life and expose everyone inside. By early 1943, the regime was reading the traces. Documentary evidence rarely preserves the full human texture of a network like this. It records dates, roles, arrests, recognitions, and the testimony that survived. It cannot recover every meal, refusal, fear, or person who passed through briefly. Restraint is not a way of shrinking the story. It keeps the known acts visible without burying them beneath scenes history cannot support. The search of Lourmel on February 8th began while Maria was away. Yuri was taken after the police found the incriminating letter in his pocket. Sources place Maria's own arrest on either February 9th or February 10th. The honest wording is that within the next 2 days she and Father Dimitri were also in custody. Maria's mother, Sophia, came to the house after Yuri's arrest. A later church account says the interrogator pressured Father Dimitri to report and suggested that Yuri would then be released. Dimitri came after celebrating the Divine Liturgy. Yuri was not released. The account is preserved testimony, not a verbatim transcript. There is no need to invent a betrayal. The network had left ordinary evidence: letters, names, relationships, and the memory of people who had passed through the rooms. The very discipline that made help reliable also made the rescuers legible to the police. Maria, Yuri, and Father Dimitri entered the camp system. At Compiègne, Maria had a final meeting with her son. What survives comes through post-war testimony, not a recording. Yuri conveyed that his mother was composed and asked others not to worry about her. Soon afterward, she was deported to Ravensbrück. Yuri and Father Dimitri were sent to Buchenwald and then Dora. Both died in 1944. Father Dimitri died from pneumonia and exhaustion. Yad Vashem records Yuri as apparently murdered. The community at Lourmel was being dismantled person by person, while the house that had joined them remained behind. At Ravensbrück, Maria was registered as prisoner 19,263. 4 letters she sent to her mother survive, 2 associated with Fort Romainville and 2 with Ravensbrück. They help establish chronology and show her effort to remain in relationship under censorship. Their available study is not a verified English translation, so this film does not place reconstructed letter language in her mouth. Ravensbrück was the largest women's concentration camp in the German Reich. Around 120,000 women and children were registered there between 1939 and 1945. Prisoners endured forced labor, starvation, disease, medical abuse, shootings, and other forms of killing. In early 1945, the SS operated a provisional gas chamber beside the crematorium. Knowledge of Maria inside the camp comes largely from survivors. They remembered her speaking with prisoners, sharing what little she had, and resisting the isolation the camp imposed. Such memories deserve both respect and precision. They tell us how witnesses experienced her. They do not give us access to every private thought or exact conversation. The memories also prevent a polished portrait. Maria became ill. Her legs failed. Other women reportedly tried to stop her from giving away food she needed. The person who had opened houses was now without property, authority, or physical strength. She could still offer attention. She also had to receive the care of others. By the winter of 1945, Ravensbrück was catastrophically overcrowded. Food was shrinking, disease was spreading, and prisoners judged unable to work faced systematic murder. Maria no longer controlled a kitchen, a spare bed, a parcel, or a protective document. Survivor testimony instead remembers the attention and companionship she could still offer inside the camp. The secure record is that Maria Skobtsova was murdered in the gas chamber at Ravensbrück on March 31, 1945. A later and widely repeated story says she voluntarily took the place of a Jewish prisoner selected for death. Surviving accounts conflict. The substitution must remain a disputed tradition, not a documented final scene. Her death does not require that disputed exchange to acquire meaning. Years before Ravensbrück, she had already placed herself beside people marked for exclusion. She stayed in occupied Paris, entered the Vélodrome, sheltered the hunted, and accepted the evidence those choices produced. The final record is spare. The life leading to it is not. Nor should the last months be treated as a triumph, untouched by weakness. Maria's body was failing, and the women around her sometimes had to protect her from her own impulse to give. That dependence belongs to the same theology as the open house. The neighbor is not only the person we rescue. The neighbor may also be the person whose care we can no longer refuse. On January 14, 1985, Yad Vashem recognized Yelizaveta Skobtsova, Mother Maria, as righteous among the nations. On January 16, 2004, the Ecumenical Patriarchate enrolled Maria, Yuri, Father Dimitri, and their companions among the saints. Their common liturgical commemoration was fixed for July 20th. The two recognitions are not interchangeable. Yad Vashem identified acts performed to rescue Jews under persecution. Canonization was an ecclesial judgment about the pattern of Maria's Christian life and death. Read together, they show why the record cannot be reduced either to social work or to the manner of her death at Ravensbrück. That pattern developed over decades. Revolutionary politics sharpened Maria's demand that ideas change material life. Anastasia's death widened her sense of maternal responsibility. The refugee houses turned responsibility into routines: meals, beds, visits, names, parcels, and funds. Her writing explained the Christian claim behind these routines. Love of the particular neighbor required attentive and useful work. Under occupation, those pre-war routines became rescue infrastructure. Father Dimitri could prepare protective baptismal records. Lourmel could shelter people and distribute food. Maria and her contacts could locate hiding places and routes toward safety. The state did not create this work. It made its continuation dangerous. The secured documentary record includes the escape of 3 children from the Vélodrome diva, the certificates issued by Father Dimitri, Maria's shelter and food work, the arrests and camp transfers, and Maria's murder at Ravensbrück on March 31st, 1945. It does not securely establish the final substitution story. Maria's significance does not depend on making that disputed scene factual. The documented record already shows a consistent development from political action, grief, and exile to monastic vocation, organized hospitality, theological reflection, and rescue. The raid at Lourmel did not begin that development. It exposed the organized form it had taken by 1943. The same discipline that made help reliable had also made the rescuers visible to the police.